And we're recording. And I want to welcome everyone again. It's so good to have everyone here. I want to welcome everyone to our Vibrant Music Without Big Pockets webinar. So this is the second of our two webinars. We hosted this twice. We are recording them both, and we will send out information on the Facebook page as well as through the email to let you know how you can get those recordings and share those. They'll also be on our Soul Matters website as well as the Association of UU Music Ministries website. But we'll get you more information about that later on. I see a few more folks joined us, so I'm gonna just mute everyone so our recording doesn't pick up echoes. And if you did just join us, feel free to unmute yourself whenever you want to talk. Real quickly, I'm just gonna give a couple things as additional things as introduction, and then we'll jump in. I want to first, just with huge gratitude, highlight my partners in crime, so to speak, that are here. Sarah Jo Brandt Doyle. Sarah, if you could wave to everyone, is the Soul Matters music director and also the music director in Syracuse, New York. And she'll be really facilitating this conversation today, along with Lyle Brown, who we refer to wonderfully and affectionately as LB. And Sarah and LB will be basically navigating and guiding our conversation today. This is also, I should say, I want to lift up our partners again at the UU, or Association of UU Musicians Ministries, previously known as the UUMN. They are probably famously known as the UUMN and have now switched over to a new name. This is co-hosted by both Soul Matters and the Music Ministries Association. So we're really glad to be partnering together to do that. And our discussion today is going to be pretty simple. We're going to focus a little bit at the beginning on some basic numbers about aspirational goals for music budgets, and then we're going to acknowledge quickly that that is not always the case, and even the aspirational goal sometimes does not provide us all that we want our music ministries to be, which leads to the main part of our discussion on how do you find, on a limited budget, how do you find music? How do you find instruments? And how do you find musicians? So those three things, music, instruments, and musicians, will guide our conversation today. We will, I want to mention briefly that after today, LB and Sarah Jo and I will do some brainstorming, and we'll probably have a follow-up, at least one, if not two, follow-up webinars that maybe get at some of the issues that we begin to address today. So at the end, again, we'll invite you to share what your ideas would be for follow-up. But for today, we're going to focus on where do we find music, instruments, and musicians on limited budgets. And Sarah Jo, let me just turn it over to you. I think you're going to introduce and start us on our way.
I think so.
Great.
I did find my notes of our plan, so I'm feeling better now.
Great.
So one of the things we thought we would do first is just kind of talk about, throw out a few numbers. So basically how much of a budget, how much of the congregation's budget should be devoted to music, including staff and salaries and all the things you need, the sheet music, the musicians, the instruments, the care of the instruments, the care and feeding of the musicians. And there's an old brochure that was put out back when we had the UUMN, and in there it says 7 to 10% is the rough estimate. And a bunch of AUUMM members were kind enough to share information with us. And in general, the people who are in AUUMM, they're going to have enough of a budget or enough support that they will be more active in a denomination. They're probably going to have larger percentages of budgets than many of you might, but many of them came in around 8%. And something that I shared last time is just for my own budget. When I first started my job at First UU in 2011 or something, I had no budget, nothing, except for my salary. And I've spent a lot of time advocating and explaining why we need money and demonstrating why we need money. And now I'm up to, last year I was up to 8.4%, and we added a staff member this year, so I dropped back down just a little bit. But it is possible to grow whatever it is you have or don't have. And that's really to do with numbers, unless we have time at the end, which we probably won't, especially with 25 people on a call. This is awesome. I love this.
Sarah Jo, there was a
Yeah.
quick question about what the budget actually includes, and this 8 to 10% figure includes staff salaries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little misleading because those tend to be a higher percentage of the budget. For actual stuff, it comes down to 2 to 5% for most of us who submitted information to the spreadsheet.
I'm glad you had that. I didn't have that information. So, all right. And we want to talk about three things today. Basically, it's how do you get stuff, right? And the first question would be, how do you get music? Second question, how do you get instruments? And the third question, how do you get musicians? And that would be, for some congregations, that's going to be, how do you get a pianist in every week or somebody to lead the hymns? For other congregations, it's going to be, how do we get special guest musicians? I'm going to kind of keep track of time. And I think we wanted to end about 5 minutes to 2 so that we could have some wrap up. But we're going to discuss everything for about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes per topic.
Sure. And I'm just going to put in a plug here for our next set of webinars, which is the how. How do we develop funds? How do we approach our board? All of that. Today's focus is simply on actually acquiring the stuff, and a lot of what we're going to be discussing is free. So you won't need to know how to ask your board for money until we start getting into the cheap stuff. And
exactly.
We'll talk about that in the next set of webinars.
Right. So
today is how do you get something from nothing?
Well, or yes, how do you live with what you have? And then the next set of webinars will be, how do you increase what you have?
So the first question is how do you get music? And I talk enough as it is. So I think if you guys have some ideas you'd like to share, that would be great. And Scott, I am taking notes. I do have notes from last time too. So they're maybe not perfect, but I have them.
So those of you with cameras, if you want to just raise a hand and I'll try and call on you. If you are participating either by phone or without a webcam, I think the best way is just going to be to shout, and hopefully we'll be able to hear from everybody during the course of the conversation. But I will be managing things a little bit to make sure that we're getting input from all over. So the question right now is, how do you get sheet music for your various groups? Jan.
My husband's a composer, and I've had him write something for us for free, and he's given permission to use it.
Great. Sarah Davis, and can I ask people to actually raise their hands or make comments out loud rather than putting them in the comments in the chat box? A lot of people will be listening to this, and we'd like to get those things captured on audio rather than simply in the chat box.
Yes,
Sarah Davis.
Yeah, we have a pretty large collection of choral music. It's a lot of it from the 70s and 80s, but it's still usable. But I have a small budget for adding to it, both for choral music and for downloads.
Great. Others? Joe Cleveland.
So we do have a budget for music, and so we just either I or the music director will go and order it.
Okay. Jan?
There's a whole list of things that are in the public domain. So these are free to download and print. But there's
And what download sites do you use, Jan?
IMSPL, I think it is.
IMSLP.
SLP,
Um,
That's all I know of.
Okay. I'll also suggest CPDL, the Coral Public Domain Library. It's cpdl.org. There's a lot of music there. It's mostly historical, but if you're looking for unusual voicings, that's a good place to look, because the Renaissance music will come in a lot of voicings. Again, the quality of arrangements and editing can vary because you get what you pay for. But I've used that site quite a bit. Bob, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say we have a large library, I would say, and it's mostly dated stuff. So I go through that periodically and cast out all sorts of things. There are also, unfortunately, a fair number of illegal photocopies in it, which I try to rid us of. I arrange a good amount of the stuff, and that's certainly no problem when it's public domain. And we have a composer who's a member of the church who's written some things.
Great. Shauna, you had a comment? Your mic's not on yet.
Okay. Hi. I am a music director. I'm also an arranger and composer. So I've written a few things. I've arranged a lot of what we do. I use one thing for newer stuff is that I've found some songs by modern UU composers or people in other spiritual groups that have material that would work, that have posted their pieces online. Actually, as an example, like Sally Rogers, who wrote one that we all do, Love, number 131, Love Will Guide Us, has written some other great things. One called The Circle Around the Sun, and the music for it was available, although it was just a lead sheet. But I do find a lot of and I just thought of this because people mention dated stuff, is that just by going online, I'm sometimes able to find new material that people are putting out there in a Creative Commons kind of, not needing to pay for the use of it. So I do look for that, and I arrange my own when I can and have time. So those are some sources, and I actually, because I have a long history in traditional music, like Appalachian and spirituals and stuff like that, I'll bring in things and do it more by ear type parts as opposed to by written music. But you have to have people who are game for that, and I've trained my choir to deal with no paper, much to their protestations. Sure.
Benji.
LB, can I interrupt for one second? Just because we are limited on time, I want to make sure we're all on the same page about the question we're addressing. So it's not how do you find music? It's what strategies do you use to find music for free that others could use as well? So I want to be, so just so we're able to focus in on giving each other tools for each other's toolbox.
Great, thank you. Benji?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, it's the first time I've used the webcam. I'll just say, I'm lucky enough to have some budget for music, but I've been surprised in the last few years how much has turned out to be for free. There are a few different songbooks that I use a lot. Peter Amidon's 25 Anthems for Church Choir, Labano's Fire Within for treble choir stuff, some Sweet Honey in the Rock stuff. And when I've written to the composers who put together those songbooks, they've told me, oh yeah, anything that's under my copyright that isn't something I arranged of someone else's, you're welcome to copy and use for free. And I also do a lot of looking on YouTube for choir music that I like, and then writing to the director of that choir. And often they've sent me the arrangement and said, feel free to use it. It's free. It's my work. So
Great. Paul Oakley?
Yes, one thing that we have occasionally, not very often, but occasionally been able to do to get music that's not already in our possession at no immediate cost is to request from neighboring congregations what they have in their files.
That's great. Jan and Benji have both bailed me out in the past on things that I've needed but did not have in my library or know the resources for. Benji does a lot of instrumental music, and last year I was looking for a klezmer piece, and he sent me an entire file folder full of pieces to look at. So relying on your colleagues is really important. Twinkle Marie, is that correct?
Yes. Hi.
Okay. Hi.
I live in Maine, and we have a group at the Bangor congregation called Women with Wings, and we have a lot of chants that we do. It's justice, earth-based, sacred feminine, and origin, and it's very teachable, very singable without paper. So it's earth-friendly too.
Great. And Sarah Joe's, Joe, do you have a comment? Joe, I'm not sure from where. No, okay. So Sarah Joe, I think you were next in the comments.
If there's an artist that's got some music, I will just ask them and call them up.
Sorry, was someone just saying something? I couldn't quite hear what it was.
That was Joe Cleveland, reiterating that if there's something he's interested in, he would like to, he calls them up directly. So Sarah Joe and then Aviva after that.
One thing I wanted to say is people who are AUUMM members are able to enter suggestions in our song database. And the more information that gets entered there, the easier it is for all of us to find stuff. So if you're a member of AUUMM, please go to the webpage and look at the song suggestion form. If you're arranging stuff or composing stuff that you're willing to share, especially cheaply or free, but for anything, right? Put it out there, and the more resources we have, the better.
Aviva, your microphone, Aviva. You're still muted. Scott, can you unmute from there?
Yeah, Aviva, I'll take care of it. You should.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. So we don't actually have a choir, and partly because there's not a budget to pay for a choir director, but it's also because I'm from a small congregation, and there's just not enough really committed people to sing every single week and to rehearse every week. However, what I've found is that I can find a piece of music that's SATB, something fairly simple, and then get some singers who are interested in doing that particular piece. And it'll be something that we can put together with maybe 1 or 2 rehearsals either before or after the service on a Sunday. And it'll be something like Peter Amadon, or we did a Hanukkah song that was arranged by a local composer. And so we've done some SATB songs like that, and the congregation has loved it, because they really didn't have any singing at all before I came. And then the other thing, somebody else mentioned a women's group. We have a group of women who love to sing, and we get together once a month, and we do a lot of stuff with invented harmonies. For example, for Martin Luther King Day, we're doing a Yara Allen song, Somebody's Hurtin' My Brother. And we're just doing invented harmonies, and we've done Holly Near, I'm Willing, and we've done Sanctuary, which I saw, Sanctuary Boston. It's a song that they do. And so we'll just look at the YouTube video, and, these are people who love to sing, and a lot of them can just create harmonies, and we'll practice it, once or twice, and then we'll just go for it. And, it's a small congregation, and there's not really the expectation that we're going to perform, serious choral music, and people love it. And, I think can be quite powerful that way.
Great. Laura Weiss?
Hi, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry I was late to the meeting. So I do recognize that some are far away from other UU churches, and we are pretty close here. So something that we've set up is sometime in like June or July, and then again in like January, we all go to each other's choral libraries, and I say, hey, I'm taking these 7, and hey, I'm taking these 5. And so we've set up this exchange where there's a pretty common practice of loaning music around. But in the absence of that, I've also found a lot of success going and visiting high schools that have show choirs. Often they're larger in scope, and my challenge has been having, oratorios, but only a limited number, and needing to fill that out because our choir is much larger than it was when it first started. So we'll have 30, but I need 70. So often it's a deal breaker. So if I go to the high schools, often those show choir groups are gigantic, and they have a lot more scores that I've been able to set my programming around, and the music tends to be secular. So it's easier for me to find repertoire that works for us. So my 2 cents.
Great. Sarah Jo. Oh, Sarah Davis first.
Well, actually, I just wanted to say we have about 1 more minute before we need to move on to the next topic. So.
Okay. I just wanted to remind people that Singing the Journey, the Teal book, has some really great stuff. I've had soloists recently do Everything Possible and Rising Green, and we're planning to do kind of a big number with percussion with Turn the World Around that Harry Belafonte did. So there's good stuff in the Teal book too.
Yeah. If you've invested money in the hymnals, really dig into them, because there's a lot of good stuff in both of them. There's some surprisingly modern things in the Singing the Living Tradition that most people don't know. They're buried in the middle, and unless we start talking them up, you're not aware of them. I'll also remind people that the call on Sunday night had a different set of participants, and some different resources were mentioned that have not been mentioned today. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to that call and look at the notes from that to get even a few more ideas than we've had presented so far today.
And I know we're at ran tight. Can I just want to piggyback real quickly on this idea of sharing music, or, figuring out a way to share each other's library. That came up in the last call we had, and I know Sarah Jo and LB and I will be talking a little bit about that. Is it something maybe we could take on with the music, AUUMM or Soul Matters or something? But quick and dirty, I think it was Laura, you mentioned how you have churches in your neighborhood. If you want to get the names of Soul Matters congregations that are near you, and by near you might say like 12 hours circle from you, contact me and I can get you those names, because that way maybe you could develop a network where you could share ideas, since everyone's on the same theme, and how you might be able to share some music more easily or some ideas. So let me know if that's one small way you can build your own network like Laura has that we're all probably jealous of.
So our next topic to discuss is really how to use instrument, or how to get instruments. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. How do you get instruments? We're not talking how do you get a piano for free. Please don't take the free piano unless you've really looked at it. But what can you get? What is realistic to expect? How do you find them? Who has them?
Do you mean instruments or people that play the instruments with their instruments?
A little of both, but right now I think we're looking at people who have the desire to have more instrumental music of any sort in their service, but don't yet have the instruments, or don't know where to get the instruments in order to make that work. And sometimes that involves getting the people. Twinkle Marie, you're first.
I wouldn't say it's exactly free, but I've gone to Goodwill and I've gone to auctions. I've actually had better success for better instruments at auctions. For instance, I bought 5 vintage hand drums for a total of $75 because no one thought they were worth more than that. I was willing to bid higher, but I walked away. It was amazing. I've seen violins. I've seen a harp. So if there are auctions in your area, even if they say antique auctions, you'd be surprised what you can get for very little.
Great. Sarah Jebian.
I've had wonderful success just asking my congregation. Now I have a fairly medium-sized congregation, but I got a drum set from somebody who was upgrading their set. It's not the best drum set in the whole wide world, but it's stationary, and we don't ever have to load in drums ever again, which is super great. But I've spent a lot of time this year just asking around and saying, hey, you playing that anymore? And they go, nope. Can I have it? And I go, yep. So ask.
Other ideas?
This is Laura. Hi, Sarah. I was so pretty to see her face. In a similar way, we were also lugging drums all the time, which is obnoxious and formidable barrier. So we actually asked the people that played drums in our congregation, could you buy a cymbal? Could you buy, a bass drum? And we actually assembled the kit from the pieces that people would be willing to contribute money. I mean, it's one cohesive kit, but different people contributed money to that. So I think when, especially with young families, we are trying to build up our set of ORF instruments, and we started reaching out to the families to say, this is what ORF instruments cost, what would you be willing to pitch in for that? And it seems like if people are invested, they're willing to usually contribute a little bit to that.
Great. Other ideas? Benji, you need to unmute.
I'll just say I'm a little confused by the question because most of the instrumentalists I work with have their own instruments. I have a pretty big instrumental program, and most of them have their own. It's just occasional players who I'm kind of asking to double on things they don't normally play that need instruments.
Sarah Jo.
Yeah, so Benji, there are congregations out there that have nothing, right? They don't even have a piano. So adding an egg shaker for a few dollars, or the egg shaker that you get free when you buy 6 music books for lessons or something at the music store, right? That type of stuff. Or making rain sticks for the kids. That could be a religious education project that then if you make them sturdy enough with thick enough cardboard, we have some rain sticks that have been there for more than 7 years. And they work great, and the kids made them, and the incoming kids love to use them. If I say, oh, let's all play rain sticks in this song, they'll come up and take them. So we're not thinking like, a cello for the cello player. Although that might be nice if you have a cellist who comes and stays at your house like I do. But smaller items that could be offered like in a pickup ensemble type of situation, or just even to keep the hymns together if you don't have another instrument.
Jan?
No.
Oh, okay.
And LB, I don't know if you can see on the screen, but Bailey is technologically raising her hand.
Okay, I cannot see that. So, because we've had so many people add, there's more people than I can see at one time. So Bailey.
I had to unmute, so I had to toggle between screens. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that there are things that people have been saying in the chat. I noticed that that there was a response about how did you find things on auction, and I think someone said that they sort of troll the local newspapers and things like that. I'm with Benji that more of my folks have their own instruments, but I also have a similar issue around drum kits. I feel like that's the big one. You want somebody to play drum kit, and they're kind of like, sure, but I have to lug it. And I'm kind of like, yeah, but I have to store it if I even could get to it. And I will say that's a thing that we haven't talked about today that you might sort of flag is I could afford to buy a drum kit. I am blessed in that way in my congregation, but I have this much room to store it. So it's like I have to sell where do I put it to my congregation, not can I acquire it.
Sure. We have people who play multiple instruments but don't necessarily own all of the instruments that they play. So we encourage like our accordion players to make their instruments available to others who might be interested in playing so that we can have a fuller sound when we put together a larger group. rather than having everybody sort of on rhythm sticks. Benji.
I will say, the few times I've done a lot of classical percussion, I've contacted band teacher friends. And especially if I can plan to do it over a Christmas break when the school is out, and they'll just let me drive up and borrow all their, a concert bass drum and bigger stands and a gong, and be able to bring it back by the time school starts again. And that's been, I've been very lucky that way.
That's great. Jan.
Yeah, I would second that. We've borrowed timpani from the local high school.
And I'm going to follow up on Laura's suggestion for getting music with the same type of thing of looking at area churches to see if they have instruments that you might need for a specific performance. I know we have a gong, and a lot of churches don't. So if somebody nearby wants to borrow the gong, we can move it out of this sanctuary for a service or two. Trying to toggle between screens here and see if anybody's itching to share anything. Of course, there's always the used music or used instrument sales at music stores of the instruments that they have rented out to kids, and then the students end up not buying them. Sometimes that's done with pianos. Well, it's often done with pianos, but also with band instruments. I'm seeing someone say from BJP say Craigslist. And check your online sources. Don't necessarily go for the first price that you get. I've seen egg shakers anywhere from $2 each to $60 for $10 from the same retailer. So dig deep as you're Google searching.
While everyone's taking a deep breath, I'm smiling because it's so interesting how groups are different. So you all are accordion and egg shaker fans. Where last Tuesday's call were big ukulele nuts. So it's very.
Shauna, you're still muted?
There. Yes. I'll just reiterate from last time that I'm fortunate that, I guess this is the next subject, but I have various musicians that come and play, and they all bring their own ukuleles, banjos, recorders, cello, and violin. And plus I often bring a guitar. So we have a good diversity of things just by using what people have and what they're willing to bring along with them.
And I know that I am personally trying to build up my instrument collection, and I have an office here in the church where I know not everybody does, but I'm storing my personal instruments at the church so that if somebody wants to use a better tambourine than the church owns, I can just run and get mine. Or if we need 7 rain sticks instead of just 4, I can grab my personal rain sticks and bring them out into the congregation. Other thoughts?
I would say that you, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm not sure who this is.
I can't. It's Bailey. I can't see my screen right now, so you probably can't see me, but there, maybe you can see me now. I was going to say that also just building capacity by letting people know that we'd love to have people offering instruments. And in my case, we ended up, ooh, I can't hear us talking against me, but I'll just, ooh, that's me. I don't know why I'm hearing myself coming back, so I'm going to mute.
I think we've got technical issues, and I'm getting an echo now. Bailey, I think you need to mute.
I think everyone who's not talking, I know we had some people come in late. If you scroll to the bottom of your screen, you should see a microphone shape that will mute.
Great. So putting the information out that you are accepting donations for instruments. And then if you get something that's unacceptable, I would think that you would want to turn around and either give that away or make it a church rummage sale item or something. How are we doing on time, Sarah Jo?
We have just a couple minutes left for this topic. I also wanted to take a second to say, if you have a building that people are using, that renters come in, we have a group of people who come and do a drum circle on occasion. And one of the women stopped in the office one day and said, I have all these weird percussion things at home and I'm downsizing and, I've been coming here for so long and do you want them? And so we've gotten donations through just cultivating relationships with the people who enter our building every day or every week that are not necessarily part of our congregation.
And if you're looking for large instruments, sadly, there are a lot of churches that are going out of business. So you can find used organs of both electronic and actual pipe organs. You can find used pianos online with just a little bit of searching, and the prices are surprisingly low because churches are going out of business. Joe Cleveland, did I see a hand a minute or so ago? Nope, just hallucinating again. Sorry, everybody. But I think Twinkle Marie.
I was just going to follow up with how a lot of our congregations have a free instrument, they just don't use it, and it is that pipe organ. It's an art that not everyone, a piano player might not know how to play an organ like that. And so in Sangerville, they were lucky they had a student who wanted to get some extra time in playing it on a big level, and it's a beautiful instrument they've kept restored. And so again, putting it out there to the community, do you have something that no one else can play? It's already a free instrument, and it's a way of doing outreach so more people know you're there too.
Which takes us nicely to the next topic of how do you get musicians, either the regular musician who shows up on Sunday and leads hymns or prelude, postlude, whatever, or special musicians.
Dan Chamberlain. You're still on mute, Jan.
For free, you're asking?
For free or for cheap?
Okay.
Ethically.
We rent our space out for recitals, various concerts and things, teaching sometimes. And I will if I like the musician and I can imagine them playing on a Sunday, I will offer a trade for rent if they play Sunday morning.
Great.
We do a lot of nice music that way.
LB, I think Bailey has virtually raised her hand again.
Okay, Bailey.
Hi, everybody. Now I'm on the audio through the video, so it shouldn't be awful. Sorry. So the first way I build capacity is by letting congregants know that I seek their engagement if they'd like to be involved with music in other ways besides singing. Back when we didn't have that visibility, so people maybe didn't realize it was an option. What they'd seen was singing in a pianist or singing in a guitarist. They just didn't know. When I first started the job, it was other congregants and staff telling me, oh, here's a list. You should talk to these people. They have offered music before. And so that was how it started, was just the basic outreach. Going forward, people sometimes come to me and say, oh, I am trying to get back into playing French horn. And, is there any, are you interested or whatever, depending on the instrument? And I say, sure, absolutely. Let me know your availability. We try to find things. And then I started carving out a specific time, and it's 6:30 to 8 on Wednesdays. So it overlaps partially with youth chorus and partially with adult chorus. It's a separate room. And people know it's Wednesday night jam session. Bring your instrument, bring yourself. There's a piano that we can unlock. And so sort of having that become a common thing. And then we have an email listserv for that. So then people email back and forth. Is anybody coming tonight? Yeah, I was planning to come. Oh, I won't get there till 7. That kind of thing. It just keeps everybody aware. And then the congregants see that those see folk up in front doing music, and they realize, oh yeah, you do that too. I didn't know you also had people who played what have you. And that experience has been very intergenerational. I really love that we have youth who come to the
Great.
jam sessions.
Great.
And then
Other
we
ideas?
pay musicians. So
Yeah.
Oh, LB, can I piggyback on it real quick? Piggyback on Bailey's. 3 systematic ways that we've sort of done the same thing that Bailey said is in the summer. You can say sneaky as well, but in the summer, after a summer outdoor service, we've had open mic or music jams. Again, that's an easy way then to pay attention to who shows up, and you might have not have noticed. The other thing is in a couple of the churches that I led, we had what was called a gift Sunday, where we talk about gifts in general. Or on Music Sunday, during the offering time, we would pass around little cards where people could list their musical gifts and put it in the offering plate. Again, just a sneaky way of how do you collect or beat the bushes to find out. And then the third one was we integrated in musical gifts into our new member joining process. So whenever someone joined the church, one of the questions that was there was not just what are you interested in or what was your calling, like many of the new members are asked when they join, but also we had an explicit question of what musical gifts do you have that you might want to share. So those are 3 sort of particular ways you can kind of get, scare some of the birds out of the bushes, so to speak.
Other thoughts, either on minding your own congregation or for going outside? Aviva.
Yeah, so we have a small congregation. So I've just announced a few times that I would love to have more participation in music. And we have some people some congregation members that regularly contribute music. We have a couple that plays bluegrass. They'll play the offertory and, or a singer-songwriter. And I always try to have it fit the theme of the day. And I'm careful about who I choose for what occasion. But we even have like a couple of teenagers that really like to sing that will do solos. And we've got some drummers that we'll use when we have like a solstice celebration, hand drums and that sort of thing. So we don't do any paid musicians besides me. It's all volunteers from the congregation. But I think it's made it's added just another dimension to the service, having a lot of musical variety. I try to get as much variety as possible.
I'm glad you mentioned themes and pre-planning. It certainly helps me a lot to have both monthly themes and to have the service topic as far in advance as possible to make sure that I can match the musicians to the topic for a variety of reasons. I mean, I'm sure you're all aware of them, so I won't go into them. Other ideas for Bob?
Yeah, we've had the opportunity, we often use congregants who have musical skills, but one way we do of checking that out is during the summer when things are less pressured and there's no necessarily given theme for the month or for the Sunday. We have a lot of, we sort of cultivate some of our local talent to play in that. And if they do fairly well, then we see if we can work them in during the year.
Great.
And for those of you who are music directors, I would just say this is no criticism of youth directors or music directors, but sometime at the end of the year when we do our youth service or a coming of age service, sometimes that's when the music directors take off. So unfortunately, that's where there's a disconnect, but suddenly there are 10 youth on stage who are performing at a level that no one even knew, yet the music director ironically doesn't know. So another source, Youth Sunday or Coming of Age Sunday.
And working with your RE director to try and find out that information. Benji.
Yeah, I would say the biggest growth in my program has been through starting to work more closely with my RE director and make sure I know through her to invite all the youth who play instruments to whatever. I'm lucky to have kind of done what Bailey was saying and feature whoever I can so people get the idea that we'll have anyone up there to the point where I've been able to kind of put together a bunch of ensembles. So we now have 3 times a year, like a full-on orchestra. Anybody who wants to play is invited and I'll write parts for them. And then we'll have like a little string ensemble and a little guitar ensemble and a drumming ensemble and various groups. And one of the best things has been making those multi-gen and just committing. It's more work to get kids to rehearsals. You have to plan farther in advance. You have to be more limited in music, but planning, just this one big in-gathering service or just Christmas Eve, we're going to commit to doing it multi-gen because it's been explosive growth in all of my ensembles to have kids involved. It's been amazing. So.
And if you're small, just against around this topic, I'll be real quick. My daughter who's in guitar, I know this isn't the case with all music teachers, but my daughter's guitar teacher requires all of his students once a year to do some public performance. So being aware of that somehow to where your church could be their public performance, that's been a good sneaky way to get folks in. And then the other thing is, I never realized it till my daughter did Suzuki. You all know this better than I, but Suzuki method of learning music. Often parents and children will do that together. And that's been some of the most powerful performances in small church worship. Having a parent and their child do a piece together that they usually have to learn anyway has just been, phenomenal. And sort of as a guaranteed higher quality because it's partly their yearly performance as well.
Right. And allowing people to do just one piece, maybe the postlude or maybe the Joys and Sorrows underscoring or whatever, so that they don't feel the pressure of, yes, I'm doing music for the church, but now I've got to do a whole service and I'm 8 years old. Have them do one piece and bring them into your music program. Sarah Davis.
Yeah, to piggyback on what you just said, I sometimes specifically, if I have an inexperienced performer, will have them do the offertory because people are a little bit more distracted during that time and they don't feel quite so much pressure. The prelude's a real pressure because everybody stops to listen. So yeah, offertory is a great place to give people that first experience.
We haven't had a lot of discussion yet about finding professionals who are willing to do your service for low cost. Does anybody have ideas on that? How you can bring in really high quality music without a high quality price tag on it?
I'll say that I recognize that my price tag would qualify as high for most people. Right? Like I have a real line, but it's low for DC, which is to say I'm not paying people twice as much money if they do Sundays with 2 services as I would pay them if they perform for 1 service. And so I usually state I have an honorarium, I get a reference from somebody, or maybe I try to go out and hear somebody if I'm gifted with time. And if it works well, often what happens is that they continue to be willing to do it because it's a non-competitive piece of time, right? They don't have another gig at that time because they're not playing at a congregation regularly. So they're more willing to do the gig for a more modest rate because it's like, well, it means I have to be careful on Saturday night, but it's not conflicting with something else. And right. I state I don't call it a fee, and it's not per hour, it's per call. This is the rate we have. I don't increase it by the person, so it's not twice as much money for 2 people. And I'm upfront about that. And if they like us and they value what we do, I find that I've now have 5 different artists who've each come 4 times a year and this past year. And so there's a relationship building piece that's happening.
Great. And let me just address Benji's point here. I'm not talking about being unethical. I think Bailey's point of being completely upfront is very important so that people know what they are agreeing to. I was kind of leading to I'm a professional musician. I'll sing at your church, you come and do something at mine. I'm a singer, you're a trumpet player, we can work something out. Laura Weiss had a comment or a question.
Yeah, we a big part of our programming is structured around advocacy for local musicians, and I think our congregation feels really strongly about the patronage that, and I think that's an important part of messaging for congregations to help them to understand that there really isn't other than churches, there aren't a lot of places where people can make income doing this. So one thing that means is often going to bat for them to be able to sell their CDs after a service to make more income, which has been successful for us. We've had people that have made more selling CDs than they have from us in compensation. We've also given the space for free later in the day for them if they have a body of people that will come and hear them perform. We don't rent it. We just let them use the space. And then as far as, Bailey's comment, it is extremely expensive to hire musicians in our area. So a big part of that and compensating those musicians is to be clear that we are not able to potentially compete with some of these larger organizations, but we are a great networking congregation. Unlike some of those where they might drop in, this is a great place to really get to know a lot of people that would then kind of yield further rewards throughout the year. And that has been the case for most of our professionals. They tend to build close relationships quickly and then get more gigs and more contact. But I mean, again, we won't be able to give, $1,000 for one call to a tenor in this area, which is what some of them would ask. So I'll leave it there.
Sarah Jo.
I'm just saying time. We have a couple more minutes and then we need to start wrapping it up and pass the ball back to Scott.
Okay. Shauna had a question?
Just
BJP
comment.
after that.
I've brought as many people from the congregation who are interested in playing into our regular program. They come in, they let me know when they can, and we use them, both people who will play along with the hymns or with an anthem with me, or a couple of classical pianists and ukulele singers who suggest something they'd like to play, and I'll schedule them in.
Great. BJP?
Okay. We have a congregation of 36 members, most of us elderly, and we occasionally get local musicians, and I am having a little bit of a struggle sometimes to get them paid adequately. Ordinarily, the max budget is $200 for a semi-professional or a qualified musician, and sometimes that's only if they have to travel to get to us. So I'm looking for comments that I can use to convince our board and our financial committee that at least that $200 is a very low amount, not an astronomical amount to pay a musician if they're bringing their own sound equipment and their own instruments. So I'm just like to hear a little quick discussion on that if possible. Thank you.
I'm not sure we're going to have time for a quick discussion on that, but I will once again say that the next round of webinars that it sounds like you all want to have is how to get funding from your board, how to advocate for your program and program's funding, and if the board doesn't step up, where else can you get money? So those are some of the questions we're looking at. But if you want to send Scott or Sarah Jo or me questions that you would like to have addressed in the next set of webinars, probably clustered around the financial end again, we'd love to have that, and we will talk about when the scheduling is going to be, or any other feedback that you have on this particular set of webinars. And I think Sarah Jo is looking to wrap up right about now. So I'll turn it back over to Sarah Jo.
I was just going to give it to Scott, so keep passing it over.
All right, I'll take it. Let's see. All right, so just real quick, as we do close up, let me do a couple announcements just to make sure everyone knows where they can access the resources that were shared today and also from our last call. So just to repeat, once again, there were two webinars where we had the same discussion. So on Tuesday, we did the same agenda, the same order of discussion that we did here, but as LB already mentioned, there were a different set of folks. And actually there was about 60% overlap, but there was a good 40% that I think is new. So it won't be wasted time for you actually to check out that recording. Point number 2, how do you get those recordings? If you are a Soul Matters member, you're probably already familiar with our website. So that's soulmatterssharingcircle.com. But on the Soul Matters website, there is a members section. And in that members section, it has everything from your packets to webinar recordings. So it'll be easily identified. There's a place to get webinar recordings where you'll click on that button and this will be listed there. And what will be listed is the recording of this call, the recording of the last call, as well as copies of the chat box for both. As it was mentioned a couple times, there was a lot of great stuff put in this chat box to go along with this recording. So all of that will be posted in those spots. If you haven't already, I would encourage you as a musician to sign up for the Soul Matters support page, Facebook support page for musicians. We'll also advertise this there, but this is a place where you can kind of always ask for help from fellow lay and professional musicians who are in the Soul Matters network. We will also share, once we know where this recording and where more information can be found within the AUUMM site and through their vehicles as well. I also would reiterate what LB had said. We're going to be doing some follow-up. We'd like to talk about doing some follow-up webinars. So by emailing me, that's scott@soulmatterssharingcircle.com. Or if you know Sarah Jo or LB, share with them thoughts you have about what would be good to follow up. One idea that we already know we're probably going to do is how do you expand? What are strategies to expand the budget and advocate for a larger music budget than you have? And then the last thing, just as a announcement, a station break announcement, since we have you as a captive audience, Sarah Jo is wonderfully generous enough to facilitate a once-a-month Soul Matters musician brainstorming call every month on the second Thursday of every month at 1 p.m. She hosts that, where folks share ideas for music for upcoming themes. So you also might want to check that out if you're not already involved. And with that, let me just say huge gratitude for the gifts that everyone shared. I had originally envisioned this as recruiting 3 or 4 folks just to talk at you all and have you all remain passive. Sarah Jo and LB smartly told me that that was not the brightest idea in the drawer. I'm grateful that they were so wise and that they won out. And because of them, we were able to get so many more gifts and ideas shared with everyone. So thanks to LB and Sarah Jo for their partnership, and for all of you, really, for all that you shared. It's a huge gift. So thank you, friends. And until next time, we'll see you.